And hello, good people of the internet. It is I, Tommy Kelly. This is Adventures in Woo Woo, and welcome back to the 6th episode of Season 2, or the rebranded Adventures in Woo Woo, or something. I am going to go back, as you may have noticed already, and retitle the last number of episodes, this new bit, as Signals, which I've mentioned before in various different places, because the whole idea of this series is for me to put together my cosmology, or at least my current understanding of my cosmology, or even my current cosmology. All opinions subject to change. And then there was the idea of putting it all together as some sort of book format. But what I found was happening because of that is that I was putting this immense pressure on myself to do these amazing big, completed episodes rather than explorations of the topics, so that was like as if I had to come in with a whole entire first draft of a theory that I then would present to the world. And what it kind of felt like was that I was studying for a big exam, and then when I went to do the podcast, I was doing the exam, and I just don't like that stress and pressure, which none of you gentle listeners is putting on me whatsoever. And a couple of hundred people who listen to this, very good looking people as well, have been nothing but supportive of whatever I do, so I do appreciate that. So I am aware that it's all self-contained pressure, but I feel that had I had a bit more loose in what I was doing with this, then I probably could have done more episodes, especially now that I have been doing the weekly vlogs on Patreon, which is just me kind of conversing or having a conversation with the camera and the people of Patreon about various different topics. Some of it's Q&A, some of it's just me rambling, and it's an awful lot less pressure. There's no editing, it's just me putting on OBS, hitting record and talking like I used to do the old vlogs. And I think that's an awful lot of reason why this is taking so long to put together. I think, and this is again me predicting things and putting myself in a box, I think like the Signal series will be 8 episodes, possibly 9. And I'm not going to say what the other ones are, because by putting the kibosh on myself by saying this one is about chakras, I kind of felt a bit boxed in. And it's, as you probably can, again, by the title, realise that it's not just about chakras. It's about my experiences and views on energy in the spiritual sense rather than the scientific sense. So going forward, if I'm doing these kind of episodes, it will be labelled Signals, and if I'm doing the other just kind of hello, how are you updates or something like that, then it'll not be called Signals, it'll just be called Adventures in Woo Woo and the title. Speaking of the Patreon, coming up next year, sometime maybe in February, will be the 47's course 2.0. It's been a number of years since the last course, and it certainly needs an update. So that will be kicking off sometime in February, all going to plan. The journey that we've been doing over the last year on Patreon ends this month. The thing with the journey is, I was talking to my publishers in Brazil. I was telling them about it and putting together this book, and it's kind of the response was, well, 12 months is an awful long time. I don't think people are that interested in it. And I mean, that's very true, because in both times that I've run the journey in the original sense, the original version and then this current version, very few people got to the end of it. Less people this time than the first time. So I was thinking of redoing it in such a way that you could do it as 12 days, 12 weeks or 12 months, and have it a bit more open for people to just use these things rather than having to commit to an entire year-long shadow work, which is probably too long anyway. So that will be put together as a book at some stage next year. And I want to re-release my comics, but we'll see. It's just getting time, and it's getting to try not to muddy up the timeline or, what you're presenting if you're just constantly just publishing stuff out there as well. Which is kind of, I look at the timeline of the podcast and the YouTube and stuff, and I want to clean all that up. I want to take all the music off the YouTube and put it on its own channel. And the Nadana videos, I don't really know what to do with the Nadana deck at the minute, because I don't obviously want to completely ignore it, but it's clearly didn't take off. Largely, I think, just because there's no book for it, there's no guidebook for it, so people don't really understand it, including myself to a large extent. I have a fair grasp of it, but not an in-depth one to be really guiding people through it or making my own videos about it. I don't know, it's just when people come to the channel, there's like, whatever it is, 26 videos very close to the latest one that people going through the backlog of the catalogue would maybe find hard to get through. Maybe I could put them into a playlist, but have them, unlisted or whatever, and just have it coming from the website or something. I might do something like that. I might remove them from the podcast feed, just tighten it up a bit more, trying to be a bit more focused. Over the last while, that's really what I've been trying to do. If you've been following me on any of the social medias or any of those places, you can see that I've been struggling, or I was at least struggling over the last while, trying to find what am I actually doing with all of this. And the result of all that, or the realization out of all that, is that I've become very scattered and very unfocused. So if someone comes and has a look at what Tommy Kelly is, could they really work it out when there's all of these disparate kind of things? So I want to kind of coalesce all that and bring all that back in. So if you see strange things happening on the timelines, that's what it is. I also made a GPT of the Nadana deck, which I will put up the link. It's on Patreon if you want it now, but I'll put it up on the store pages and stuff like that for the handful of people who have bought it and enjoy it. Anyone who has it seems to enjoy it. So yeah, I think that's all the news and all the kind of updates I want to do. This will be the first episode that I will be putting up on Substack. So if you're new to Substack, I will leave in the Substack description page links to all the other previous episodes of this. So without any further ado, let's get into this. So in the last episode, I mentioned that this one was going to be on chakras, but I'm going to widen that out a bit more to a general more discussion about my experiences and my views and my understanding of energy in general rather than just specifically to the chakras. But I will touch on the chakras because just to bring it into the whole kind of overall cosmology and how that works with regard to the mother, the father and the child. And I suppose I must start by saying I probably have or subscribe to the energetic model of magic more than all of the rest. And I could say that I don't, but the test of it is how you actually use these things or how your life has actually worked rather than what you think it is. And I think I predominantly work in an energetic model and I feel that it explains things the best. And it's because it's what I was kind of exposed to early on, and that has been, the biggest influence on me. But by energy, I probably don't mean what you mean by energy, or maybe I don't mean what you mean by energy in the same way that I think like gods are energy. You might go, no, gods are spirits, and I think spirit is energy. But, you can have an argument then that, it's just semantics and we're just talking about the same thing using different words, which is a huge problem in all of these discussions on magic and the occult and whatnot, which we found recently in the book club that we were doing in the Adventures in Woo Woo Patreon, which was the Alan Moore and Steve Moore's bumper book of magic, The Moon and Serpent, where it's an awful lot of common terminology that's used in the occult and magic circles where it's kind of suggested that it all is pointing to the same thing. Often when you break down, people are using the same words to describe different things. And that can be quite confusing and unhelpful in many ways. When I talk about energy, I certainly don't mean the energy that, say, Einstein was talking about or, the physics or anything that, although maybe I am in a certain way, but I just hate or I find it hard to deal with, kind of immediately switch off when I start hearing new age people or spiritual people or magic people talking about quantum entanglement and double slit, observatory effect, all of these things, where it's just kind of shoehorning in stuff that may or may not actually be describing the thing that they think they're describing. So when I talk about energy, what I mean is like the life force, chi, ki, vril, although that's a new term, and has associations that maybe not what I'm looking for. Rauch, is that it's more German kind of pronunciation from Kabbalah. The life force, the energy, the spirit, I suppose, the father from the overall cosmology that I've been talking about previously. And my first intro into energy, as I say, it's a very early influence, it would be through Stuart Wilde, who I've talked about extensively. Briefly, he's a New Age author from the 80s and early 90s. That was his heyday. Literally, he was published by Hay House and he was the darling of the New Age movement. He was huge. He was the most successful. He was up there with all the big names on tour with all of these people like Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, all of these people, and then kind of subsequently was forgotten about, mostly because he got very dark at the end. He got very strange. There was rumours of drug addiction, alcoholism, etc. There was a number of scandals, all of these things. But he's a name that isn't really recognised anymore. Most the pity. While I don't agree with everything he ever said, of course, I did learn an awful lot from him, and he probably is my biggest influence on my spiritual life. And he talks about energy in the sense of it's the etheric, mostly is the name he gives it, which is the kind of energy field around people, around living things, around, it's almost like he describes it as the aura, or, the etheric double, which is your body in the astral or in the etheric. And it's all kind of, again, one of these things where he would use the word etheric in a different way than, say, the Theosophist would or some other people would. He sees it mostly, though, as an energy field around it. That is the animating principle, and has many different ways and many different techniques on how to interact with that and to improve it and to do some tricks with it and stuff. A lot of it is very new agey approach to it, where it's all about vibrations, man. And his notion that whatever you're vibrating at is what your experience will be. And he has these kind of rough numbers that if you're vibrating at 10,000 cycles a minute, you're in danger zone, whereas someone is oscillating at 20, 30, 40,000 cycles is kind of removed from the humdrum accidents or bad things or even diseases or stuff like that. And so you would kind of very much blame vibrations and energy, for people having mishaps, bad luck, sickness, all of these things, which is quite questionable. Like, I don't think it's as simple as that. Well, I think all of these things are probably a factor, like positive thinking, having a positive outlook, affirmations, all of these things, the whole law of attraction stuff. I think it definitely has an effect, but whether it is the most predominant effect in your life or the most predominant influence, I doubt it. There's so much else going on in this time, place, circumstance, society, culture, trauma, hang-ups, physicalness, all of these things that are also a factor that there's no way you're going to think yourself up or oscillate yourself out of every, bad part of the world or every bad incident. And this notion that if something happens to someone, then in a sense, it's their fault for oscillating so low. But I also think, you should aim to oscillate more, even if that is just metaphor, like to become a higher order version of yourself, to become a more rounded, energetic being. But that doesn't mean then if something goes wrong, it's that you didn't have the right attitude or you weren't oscillating or you didn't have the right diet or whatever. All of these things, again, are factors, but not, sometimes things just happen to bad, or good things happen to bad people for no reason and bad things happen to good people for no reason. But he's loads of different exercises he called like etheric stretching, the 4 disciplines of the initiate, and different things like turbo thought and a whole host of different things in order for you to widen, expand and strengthen the etheric field around you. He's talks about how you can see the etheric, and to be able to see it is using the sides of your eyes. There's rods and cones. Is it the rods that are on the side of the eyes and the cones are in the centre? And these are black and white, they don't have colour, image. They're less precise or whatever, but it's through these that you're able to see it, according to Stuart Wilde, and to practice seeing it by looking at things kind of sideways, I suppose, or just being more aware of your peripheral vision and certain things like looking at a tree and then looking slightly above it so that you can see the energy field. And to a certain extent, I can see the etheric as described by Stuart Wilde. It doesn't have any colours for me in the way that people who see auras can see colours. But while it's okay, and I can go, right, fair enough, when I can see it around people, or I can see it around trees, or I can see it around living things, I can also see it around kind of everything else, if, like dead things. I know if we live in an animistic world, everything has some sort of life form, even a rock or whatever, but it's the same kind of quality, it's the same kind of vibration, if you want, it's the same kind of level that I can see looking at someone or a tree as I can see looking at my chimney as I look out the window of my bedroom. And I can't imagine that the etheric field around the chimney should be as strong as the etheric field around my son. So I don't know what it is I'm seeing. Maybe it's just like, that thing, if you stare at a light and then you close your eyes, you can see it, that impression that is made on your eyes. Could be something like that. And that could just be me. I'm not saying just because that's my experience of it that it doesn't exist, but that's the only way I can kind of judge it as well on my own experience. So he would say then, to be a successful person, you would have to be a high oscillating person, and you would have to be high energy and bring a lot of energy to, all the different things you do. And I think, I think there's a lot to be said in that. I know myself and say my moods or my various different mental states, that when they are low, everything does feel like it's going a bit slower, a bit more sluggish. It's a bit heavier. Physics seems to change slightly. Things get harder to do, heavier to do, all of these things. And when everything's going right for me, or when I'm in a good place or whatever, if I have a positive mental space that isn't forced, when it comes naturally, that things do seem to be going at a quicker rate, a higher oscillation. Things seem to be lighter. My mind doesn't seem as heavy. The surroundings around me doesn't feel as heavy. My body doesn't feel as heavy. All of these things. So I don't dismiss that oscillation thing entirely, but I don't think it's an accurate scientific description of what's going on. But I know the difference between low and high oscillation, whether that's the right name for it or not. So I would have done these kind of exercises for a number of years, and it was then after that I came across things like energy healing and Reiki and all of that kind of stuff. My first foray into energy healing was when I was hanging out with a bunch of druids I would have been around 22, 23, something like that. And they were big into energy healing. I think it was mostly what they were doing was a thing called bioenergy healing, but I'm not quite sure. It was kind of a self-taught. There was no attunement or initiation that I was aware of that they went through. That was just something that they said inherently we all had, we're all able to do. Yet some of them clearly were better at it than others. So there's maybe some sort of practice element or some sort of talent element to it. There was a way they would do it. It was hands-on healing, and it was released through them, through their body, from the patient, from the client, into their energy field, and then it would be released usually through rifting or coughing or some sort of mouth release, I suppose. Maybe there was other releases that they kept to themselves. That was interesting, and they would tell me some very interesting stories about the, really miraculous healings that they witnessed or they were a part of, and they had a healing session every Tuesday night in the local town hall place where they were based in the Midlands. Stories of people's backs realigning, chronic pain disappearing, skin conditions, all of this, and it was very interesting. And I did try, of course, to do some of these things to no avail or to no effect, at least that was discernible to me or the person I was doing it on. And I got a bit of it done by them, and it's, I don't know, looking back on it now, knowing what I know about energy healing and various other experiences I've had, it seemed like a kind of a weaker energy or something, or maybe it could have been just, of course, the case that I wasn't receptive to it, or I wasn't in need of it, was something like that. So they definitely seemed to be on to something. I just don't know what it was. I was quite skeptical at the time anyway, and I really, wanted to have hard proof of all these things. Skeptical, of course, of that I was a believer. I wanted, physical proof of all of these things to really give it all my faith. Next time I actually went, I was having in my life, I was having a particularly bad time, very low moods. I was oscillating at about 5 vibrations a minute, compared to whatever is the optimal 50,000. Who knows? It was coming from, my parents split up when I was about 17, 18, something like that. And I moved out very shortly from the house around that time as well. And probably never really dealt with all of it. Or didn't know how to, not that I was avoiding it, just too busy trying to be a rock star and partying and all that kind of things. And it just kind of probably all just landed in my early 20s back, where I had to kind of deal with, especially when I got into a relationship at that point. And of course, being in a relationship brings up all of these things about other relationships, all that kind of stuff, all that shadow stuff. And so I went to see a Reiki healer, Seamus. He was known to, I think it was actually my mum paid for it, which was very nice of her. She had gone, or her friend had gone to him, and he came recommended. And I think I did 6 sessions with him, and there was definitely a much greater kind of response or feeling or an energetic response to that healing than there was from the previous stuff I had got. And it was interesting because the Druids really kind of disliked or looked down on the whole Reiki thing, because it was just seen as, I don't know, marketing or a product or just something that normal people did. It wasn't a real deal or something like that. But yet, interestingly, after my experience with Seamus and going to Reiki, a couple of them did end up going to him as well. And subsequently, the high priestess of the order, went on to train as a Reiki at the same school that I did it at the same college. Seamus also used a number of the back remedies, famous for the rescue remedy, but there's a whole other ones which are quite, I suppose, now would be considered homeopathy. He also used these Australian bush ones, which were more what he had focused on. And he believed that they worked at a vibratory, what's the correct way to, on a vibration level, where he would hover them or leave them on the body to see if, the gel vibrated with the particular issue. When I was doing that, I felt that my entire body was off to one side energetically, where that I had, if I was standing or lying down on the plinth, it felt that somewhere around my midsection that my legs went off to the right and my head went off to the left. So I was at a 45-degree angle to myself, which I still feel at times, particularly when I'm meditating and trying to, with my eyes closed or whatever, and I'm trying to make sure that my posture is suitable when I'm doing something like Zazen or, sitting on the floor rather than sitting in the seat. I can feel that I'm off to one side when I'm not. So we worked on that stuff and a couple of other things. The really interesting thing that happened to me in that was that at one stage I started, I pretty much had a panic attack lying on the plinth, with, listening to new age music as Seamus put his hands, I don't know if he was on me or close to me. And I found it very, very hard to breathe, to the point that I had to say something, sit up, get a drink of water and just kind of chill out. And that was pretty intense. when I finished the 6 sessions, Seamus go, oh, the people will notice some difference of you, they won't know what it is, they'll say it to you, or you'll notice a big difference, there'll be a big clearing, and, the sense of, oh, we cleared an awful lot of stuff there. And I never really felt that after. And maybe it's because I had so much stuff to clear or whatever. But while it was good, I never really felt that this massive kind of impact that I was expecting from it. One of the other things that he used to do is he'd leave the session early and let his guides or the Reiki people or whoever it is work on me, which I found very strange. And seemingly that's a thing that a lot of Reiki people do, where they're told to get out of the way and to let, I don't know, whoever it is that he works with, these beings or spirits to work on me. In one session, I just got up and go, is that it? And so he goes, no. You have to sit there and lie there. Didn't explain it up beforehand. My next experience with Reiki was when I went to Holistic Health Studies, which was a 2-year course. I think I'm 25, 26, 27 when that's going on. Something around mid to late 20s. 27 at most, it's when it's over. And did a number of things: aromatherapy, reflexology, Indian head massage, kinesiology, colour therapy, care provision practice, anatomy, physiology, some sort of psychology stuff, diet, nutrition, all this kind of stuff. And Reiki was part, and I think the Reiki was done over 2 years, where Reiki 1 and 2 was done the first year and Reiki 3 was done on the second year. But my memory is a bit hazy around that. But that seems like what probably was likely to happen. I got really into Reiki at that point, and I was in, part of, online forums and reading all the books, had all the books, trying to do it as much as possible. Really seeing it as not something I wanted to get in as being a healer, but as a way to heal myself or to spiritually advance or to whatever, just become that wise old kung fu Chinese man that you see in movies, something like that maybe. And it was at that point that I probably got into magic really as rather than just some sort of new age spirituality thing. And that was true. One of the women at the course was a Wiccan, and that kind of influenced me to get into witchcraft and magic and all of that. Although I had been reading Crowley when I was at secondary school, but not to any great extent. So when I got the attunement for the Reiki 1, I had a vision. I'm quite hyper phantasic. That's completely not pronouncing that right, but I'm very easily of visions and a very rich inner visual landscape. So seeing visions isn't something that is, it's part of my everyday life, I suppose. And I assume coming from the fact that I do so much art But during the attunement, first when I had this, I was in a desert, there was some Persian or Middle Eastern people with, scarves and headdresses, and they were on horses and they were coming over this hill, and one guy, he was in black, and he's this kind of sense of him saying to me, welcome. So I thought, oh, this is brilliant. I'm finally on the path. This is going to be it. This is what I'm meant to be doing, or whatever. Ultimately, when I left that course, I think I was too saturated in it, too much, that I just needed a break. And I didn't realize it was what a break I needed. Instead, what I did is just let go of it all for a couple of years, which, it's not a bad thing either. I didn't have any massive experiences, I suppose, of Reiki during that time, from the people doing it on me or me doing it on other people, although there was definitely a sense of feeling energy and being aware of energy and being aware of when someone started using the symbols or the sigils and when they didn't, and being able to sense different people having higher energy Reiki than other people, or, a different flavour and stuff like that. So I was aware of all of that. But also again, during that time, because you're doing so much healing, like you're getting an awful lot of massage done on you, an awful lot of aromatherapy done on you, an awful lot of Reiki done on you, an awful lot of reflexology done on you, an awful lot of all of these things, it kind of not quite, but some sort of breakdown that I had, particularly in the second year. Everything just kind of went wrong, but there was stuff going on in my life as well. I'd messed up royally in a relationship, personal interactions with people or personal relationships with, my close friends, were all going to shit. And it was a real kind of weird, that ultimately led into an extremely dark time, which also probably was a lot to do with why I subsequently just couldn't thinking about any of these kind of topics anymore. Then my mum started learning how to do Reiki, and she was thinking that at some point that this might be an avenue for her to do it as a profession. She was getting funding for it, that ultimately when they went to do level 3, the funding stopped. So she wasn't able to do anything. It was kind of a wasted funding for 1 and 2 because she can't practice it unless you have level 3. And so I got some from her and give her some as well. But then there was no real kind of Reiki in my life for a long while, until just before or just after I started doing the Adventures in Woo-Woo stuff, maybe a couple of years into doing that, where I went and got some more Reiki done with a woman called Ruth, who was very nice and very good at what she did. And I had some mental experiences with her. One of them is where I went into a very deep vision that involves me being told that I was the center of the universe, or I was a star child, or I was the chosen one, or I was on some special mission or something from the universe, which was great because it led me to realize that the whole kind of chosen one trap that so many people fall into. And I could have at that point, I suppose, to myself, where, at some point on the spiritual journey, you're going to be told you're the chosen one, or that you have a special message, or that you're in some way, special. I think it's a test or initiation of some description where, the object of it is to say, you're all right, thanks very much, but no. You hear so many stories, like the one I mention a lot is Helen Schuckman, when she was first kind of contacted, I suppose, she had a vision of, some sort of scroll or something that she was going to be chosen to, write, which was ultimately A Course in Miracles. And she's like, nope, no, thank you, I'm not into that. And a number of theosophists, pretty sure Alice Bailey said no as well, and initially, and it's, if you say no, then the secrets of the world get allowed or trusted to you. I never received the secrets of the world by saying no. Maybe I should have said yes. Maybe I am the chosen one. I just haven't lived up to it or haven't accepted it. So that was good. But that was a very intense experience. A lot going on. There was a lot of things happening in the different sessions with Ruth on a very high energetic level. Expansiveness, lots of visions, lots of, insights, all of these things. But again, ultimately, it didn't change my life dramatically. I think I'm looking for too much out of these things. I was looking for some dramatic change, that it was like a before and after, before this happened, I was like this, and after that, everything changed. And these are all kind of gradual changes or slow burns that, if I can look back now from me and then look back, to who I was when I was 19 or whatever, there's definitely an awful lot of healing has gone on, definitely an awful lot of understanding, insights, all of these things. But if you try to look at, as I would, particular moments where a cataclysmic event, a healing event or something like that changed everything, it doesn't seem to work that way for me. Another kind of thing that I got into then was this medical assistant program. I learned about this through the kinesiology teacher at the Holistic Health Studies when I was doing that. And he gave me this book, and it's an Australian book. And I talked about it a fair bit in the lockdown diaries that when I was doing the daily videos during that interesting period in all our lives, where it's kind of, you build up a rapport with a team that is your medical team, and you call them in through a process called coning, and they work on you and heal you spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, all of these things. And the very first time I did this, the very first time you do it, there's a thing where you have to do a scan, you let them scan your body. And I really felt that. It was quite intense. It was quite, this is happening, this is working, this is doing something in it. But after that, I subsequently never really felt anything from the MAP stuff. And I tried a number of times. And other than the fact that, I had such a crazy intro to it or whatever, that I probably would have dismissed it out of hand. But there seems to be something to it. What it is, I am not sure. So that's kind of the energy healing kind of things of trying to improve my etheric or my chi or, my life force or my double or my astral body or whatever it is that we have, various different terminology and words for all of these things, to the point that I kind of feel that, there's definitely something in it. The thing that it is, whatever it is that I'm interacting with the energy in Reiki or the energy in healing or the energy of the etheric or whatever it is, seems the same thing that I'm interacting with when I interact with spirits or when I interact with deities or with gods or with demons or whatever. It has the same quality to it, in that the feeling of energy healing, while not the same flavour or not the same intensity or not the same taste, is the same thing as my experience of, say, Mercury or Ganesha or Jesus or whoever. That on that level, that when people are on an energetic level, that's where it all kind of feels as if these divinities or these things are an encapsulation of a certain type of energy, including the humans being an encapsulation, but seem to have an extra layer, whereas they're just energy. We have energy and a physicalness, because we are the combination of the mother and the father. Not to preclude that they could have a physicalness or they couldn't enter into a physicalness or something like that, but it seems that they work, or their abode is on that kind of energetic level. So it's just a way of, I suppose, describing spirit or describing your ancestors or describing ghosts or whatever as an energetic impression or vibration or frequency or wavelength. that you can tune into. All of these things kind of work on one way, but if you look at it too deeply, fall apart. But that's why I think everything is energy, and why I have an energetic kind of outlook on things is because it all feels the same to me. The same thing that happens when I'm getting a download from the universe in a creative sense is the same kind of, it's the same thing as what happens during a healing. It's the same feeling. It's the same feeling of what magic is. It's the same feeling of what creativity is. Like, I think when people talk about the field, which is like the energetic field in which we all kind of are situated in, people seem to talk about that slightly differently. So it's another one of these words or these terms that we use as if we all know what we're talking about, and not necessarily are. But it's like there's this kind of energy field within which all of this kind of physicalness happens. My kind of cosmology, of course, is that it's two things coming together rather than the field encapsulates or encloses or creates the physicalness. It's like as if it descends into it, impregnates into it, imbues it, like that the physicalness is receptive to it. It's like a great big sex act, it's that kind of thing where it's this union between the two things rather than a field, like a matrix that is generating the various places or the people or, but it has no inherent self. While I do have reserves on the whole non-duality thing, I know also that I kind of dismiss it because or have dismissed it or have a less kind of feeling about it because an awful lot of the people who promote it or whatever, promote it in a kind of a way that annoys me, in a kind of a spiritual bypassing way. You don't exist, so suffering doesn't exist, and all is one. And it kind of feels pointless, this the Alan Watts thing of, it's just a game of hide and seek, as if the whole thing is a wonderful experience for everyone and that the horrors of existence, I don't really worry about them because they're not real. It's a very privileged position to have, that non-dual, there's no suffering. All of this is an illusion. And while an awful lot of non-dual people would have compassion and kindness, warmth and generosity towards people, a lot of them don't. I have almost like a hatred it comes across, or a misanthropy or something, or a kind of a distaste for the human experience. An awful lot of spirituality seems to be to do anything other than be a human. Tommy goes on a tangent. To my point of while the non-dual thing, why I dismiss or I have issues with it, I have to also be aware that could be just because of my distaste of the presentation or the people presenting it, or or something like that. And even down to things like, like spiritual transmission, which is the idea of that if you're in a presence of a high spiritual being, that you can in some way latch onto that and get a bit of a taste of it and, become awakened or have insights temporarily in the presence of their aura and their energetic field or whatever. And I've had transmission a couple of times. More than a couple of times. Or at least I've had the experience that lines up with what other people who claim to have transmission describe. The first time was ever with Stuart Wilde in Glastonbury, where everything faded, everything fell away, and it was just me and him, and then it was just, everything was gone, and his face was making all of these different, turning into all different things, but everything disappeared. And he was like a good distance from me. Like I was at the back of the room and he was up on stage, but it was like the closeness. There was no separation. But no, that's not it. There was slight separation. He was like in front of me, like as close as you could be physically. And then he made, when it kind of all expanded out again and widened out again, he made acknowledgement, that something strange or interesting had happened or peaceful had happened in that moment. But one of the most intense experience of it was from watching a YouTube lecture from Adyashanti, which, on an energetic level, I suppose you could say, well, it doesn't really matter because time doesn't exist and these things. But it seems more that it triggered something in me rather than being in the presence, because you would think if the idea of transmission is to be in the presence of this person and being in their energy field, and you would need to be in their presence. Although people say, they've had transmission from looking at photographs, they've had transmissions from, holding books, transmissions from holding relics, or personal items of the, the guru or the saint or whatever it is. So maybe, a possible thing, but it certainly felt the same as, no separation. Mind and body fell away. The universe directly speaking to me as myself, all of these things, and it's also like a tunnel vision thing or something where everything just comes really, 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 really close. Another time, and I suppose it's, again, another form of maybe transmission was, I remember the very first time I talked to Duncan Barford, and that was over Zoom. There was no kind of transmission. Duncan Duncan Bradford is a person who is awakened or claims awakening, or whatever way you want to look at that. If you want to know about his awakening stories, he has the Baptist Head books and podcasts and all of that stuff. But it wasn't there was no kind of transmission during the Zoom call by any means. But that experience of when I was in the monastery garden that I've talked about before, where for people who don't know, I was in the garden of a monastery, and the entire energy level of the whole place just changed dramatically. And my wife and my son are there, and they're doing things that I'm still there, but I'm not there. And it's not quite that you would say what felt like a dream. It felt like the quality of physicalness changed dramatically. And I was looking around, and I was like, this is the garden. I'm in the Garden of Gethsemane. The place of ultimate suffering, of betrayal, of, knowledge that things are about to go to shit, and all the suffering as Jesus knows what's ahead of him, all of that, and, the doubt and the whole prayer of, can you please take this away, if it's possible. But then kind of noticing that also every single tree was also the tree under which the Buddha gained enlightenment. Every tree was the Bodhi tree. And so it was this kind of place of being in the place of ultimate suffering, but the place of, awakening. And in Jesus himself, on an energetic level, he wasn't there kind of looking at me, the sense of him being there, and that he loved me, and he was really intense. And in my head, I have with Jesus, I have a complicated relationship with Jesus, being brought up Irish Catholic, and kind of close in a hatred for all of that. Again, I have to be aware of my blinkers and not to throw babies out with bathwater. I have a good understanding, or a good encapsulation of what Jesus feels like in many ways. So from that, and previous to that, it was kind of like a reminder, but also a very heightened sense of it. Very hard to explain all of these things without sounding like a nut, or sounding like, I don't know what sounding like. Anyway, I assume if you're listening this far that you have some sort of interest in this. And it was interesting as well, because by the end of that, I was putting my son into the car seat at the back, and he's going mental, he's giving out, he's angry or whatever. And I'm trying to deal with that, and I can feel myself getting angry, but at the same time, this loving Jesus stuff is going on all around me. And it's kind of funny. On one level, I'm really angry, not really angry, but I'm upset with my son, trying to deal with that. But another level is laughing at myself, or laughing at the whole situation, or whatever. And that kind of feeling of whatever, that insight, awakening, Kensho, energetic event, whatever, stayed around for a week or two. Not as intense as that, but not like a low level, no, mid-level bliss for a long while, just in the background all the time. And you can see it in the vlogs at the time. You can see, when I look at them, you can see that there's some sort of spark going on. It was just a manic phase. But that, again, the reason why I'm saying that is because that happened after talking to Duncan. In some way, it felt like that there was a trigger there too. Whether that was a trigger of me allowing myself, having had a conversation with someone, who I considered a learned man, who knows things, or what, I'm not really sure. I sent him an email, just try, because I was trying to at the time not dismiss these things, just kind of put them away or not. But I also didn't want to badge collect these things either, or kind of put them on pedestals or anything like that. And I was just trying to, because I was going, right, I just want to explain, I want to make note of what this is. And I just sent him an email, says, this is what happens after you have a Zoom call with Duncan. And his response was like, yeah, well, I hope you don't feel that you have anything to do now because of this, or that, that in some way you're on a mission or something like that. And it was that, I suppose it was just that kind of thing of, don't suddenly think you're the chosen one, or that there's, that you're on a special mission from God, or any of these things. I was like, no, I'm well clued into that, because I these kind of high energy experiences are likely to, if you're so inclined, to put you in a position of thinking you're in a much better spiritual part of the hierarchy, of the spiritual hierarchy, than you are. And I've had it a few other times, but they're the kind of the most intense versions of it. And some of them have a different kind of flavour, in that it's not really, it's the expansive but also deeply focused thing, or whatever. It's just kind of a sense of bliss or something like that, or kind of almost like, when you look at someone and you fancy them or something like that, and they fancy you, and there's that moment of connection or something like that, where it's kind of like that. So it's not quite the same, but it's not nothing, it's something. And that was mostly what my other ones would be. Again, not there was many, one or two other things. The other massive energy experiences that I've had is something that I have been having for a long while, since I'm around 10, 11, something like that. And it's that sense of what has been called by people who like to label things, is called felt presence, which we called, myself and my sister, when we first noticed it, called it that place. And one of the very first podcasts I ever did was about this, but and I was listening to it yesterday just to make sure that my story is still straight, that's still the same thing. So I'll leave that in the show description rather than reiterate the whole thing here. But it's just kind of this thing of when we would talk about spiritual topics, when we would talk about creepy topics or ghost stories or whatever, but it's usually more about like kind of spiritual, what's the meaning of the world, all of this kind of stuff, that there would be a sense of that the pressure in the room would drop, almost like the temperature would drop. Things would seem to get a bit heavier. It's hard to, all these things as usual, hard to explain. I wish I was more articulate. As if something descended, or as if we lowered, or something came in. But there was a definite change in the atmosphere of the room, like something was aware of us, now looking at us or paying attention to us. And it felt very male, for me anyway, and almost alien in a sense. And I remember it happening, and it happened a couple of times, and then at one stage we both said it to each other, or can you feel that has happened? And we both could, and that's what we kind of label it as that place. How are you in that place? And it happened enough that to label it, you know. And then I remember I was in a friend of mine's house, about 19 or whatever, and his mother was like a healer or a psychic or could see your past lives, this kind of stuff. And my friend was going on about how clear the house was, you know, that she was really good at clearing. And I was like completely in that place, in that house as well. That oppressive sense of someone being in the room with you. And it's not like, I mean, it's uncomfortable and unpleasant, but it's not like I necessarily felt that it was anything bad was going to happen, I suppose. Maybe, I don't know. I'm maybe trying to make excuses for it so that it might be, you know, a real good experience. That I'm just, you know, that you have to acclimatize yourself or acclimate yourself to, you know, it was like, say, that whole thing of when an angel appears in the Bible and it says, the first thing it says is, don't be afraid, chill out. You know, it's like if you did become in contact with an alien presence, a higher order energy, something vibrating at a higher level or a lower level, or whatever it is, it would take you a while to get used to it, and it would be unfamiliar, and it would be unpleasant, and it would be discombobulating and all of those things. So that's why, while it feels unpleasant, I don't want to dismiss it as being something necessarily bad or malefic or anything like that. On and off it happened. One time I was living on my own in a house, and I was upstairs in the house, and I was reading an awful lot of Stuart Wilde and a lot of stuff about him talking about aliens and the greys and all of this kind of stuff, and about how they used to come into his house, and this was during Stuart's interesting period, and that he used to run after them with swords, and that would kind of chase them away or whatever. And I remember having that kind of sense of feeling in that house of like these alien things coming in through the walls or something, and that would get me very much to that place as well. That's where I think there's kind of an alien feel to it, that I don't know if there is an alien feel to it, or I'm just associating it with that period. That was quite intense, that house. That was also the place where I had the most unbelievable sense of bliss ever in my life, that just like completely and utterly wiped me, and I had to lie down. It's just the most joy I've ever felt, and the sense of, oh, we made it, we did it, we got it, we finally got here, we did it, which happened previously to me, but not to that level. So there was a lot, some interesting times in that house. Then when I went in the current house I'm in, there was an extended period of when I would wake up in the middle of the night into that place, like as if that place had already been there, and I just woke up into it. And of course, it was always around 3 o'clock. One of these times was around, I was kind of messing around with Lucifer, having interest in Luciferianism and all of that. And I kind of associate it with that, but I'm not necessarily sure. But it was like 2 or 3 weeks of every night this happening, waking up at 3 o'clock, to the sense of that weird thing in the room, the sense of being absolutely stared at or looked at, or someone had turned their attention to you. In the end, to get rid of that, I just shouted at it, screamed at it, just, you know, fuck off. If either do something or fuck off. And it went, and it didn't come back. Yeah. And then it did come back in the middle of doing Tasta at some point, because we had talked about it in Tasta. It started happening again every night, and it was very intense, to the point that it would start making me not want to go to sleep. You know, I'd get very apprehensive about it, because it was like full on, I don't know, like like I wasn't looking forward to it. Very unpleasant. And the very last night of that one again was I woke up in the middle of the night. My wife wasn't in the room. She was in with my son in his room, and there was like obviously a chair or something in the corner, or maybe something in the corner, and I knew that's where it was. And again, I just got angry with it. I was going, either fucking do something. What, tell me why you're here, what you want, or piss off, because I'm not doing this anymore. And it did, which kind of reminded me of that whole thing of Stuart Wilde running around his house, chasing after the Greys with a sword. But just to go, enough. Either do it. So I don't know if I banished something that was good, or I should have interacted in some way, but it's deeply uncomfortable to be in that. And after that, I put a lot of warding around the house, a lot of different things, set up a servitor to just stop all of that kind of thing, and it hasn't been back since. Possibly having spoken about it now, that there's a chance that it will come back. But that again, that felt... Bring it back to the energy. I was feeling all of that on an energetic level. It wasn't like a physical lowering of the temperature in the room. The air got, didn't physically get more viscous or, more intense or whatever. But that's the feeling of it. It's like as if there was a kind of a notion of the whole room became a bit more treacly, or a bit more, I don't know, liquidy, heavy liquid, oily or something, or, treacle, honey, that kind of, like everything got a bit dreamlike. Actually, now that I think of it, the very worst experience I ever had of that was when I moved into the office, the very first week of moving into the office, and I had been mad into growing mushrooms, certain types of mushrooms, and I took them for the first time, haven't grown them or whatever. And it was a wonderful experience for a long while. Yeah, really tasty mushrooms. Gold teachers, for those who know. Then it all kind of went a bit weird and got that oppressiveness arrived, and that place arrived in it, and I couldn't really deal with it being in the inebriated state that I was. And that was very intense. It was like as if that oppressive thing, whatever it was right behind me, over my shoulder, looking at me, and I was kind of going, I have to get out of here. And it was like I was going around turning off the lights, but it was right there the whole time, the whole thing, making sure I was turning off these lights, like really oppressive, really horrible. And then when I came out and got everything out, and it kind of followed me into the house. And again, I was in the room on my own at the time, and like it was horrible. The rest of the night was absolutely horrible. It felt like that presence, like there was a dark presence at the end of my bed, just looking at me the whole night. And if I woke up, I would be immediately back into that. I know that's drug induced in some sense, but it's also kind of like a combination of that energetic, that place coming together when you're in a kind of vulnerable state. I wasn't able to handle it. I'd be better equipped to do it now, but I probably wouldn't do it now, in that I would know what to do. I have a better protection system. I have better relationships with various energetic beings that I could have called on. But yeah, very intense, very horrible. That was definitely the one where it really felt like, there's something bad here. There's something not good here. This isn't something that I could possibly spin into thinking that it was a good thing, or just something I'm unfamiliar with. It felt really, something dark and means to do me harm, but of course didn't do me any harm at all, other than looked at me. I mean, loads of other things I've spoken about before, about the different kind of, arrivals from divinity coming in, all again on an energetic level on these things. And then you've other things, like, of course, I've talked about attunements recently on a vlog in Patreon, which is again another energetic thing. And then you have, other stuff like energy leaks. If someone says something to you, you can just feel your energy entirely draining out of you. All of these things. There's plenty of different energy things, but I think I have droned on a bit too much. What I wanted to do, just to finish up here, is just talk about the chakras themselves very briefly. There's enough on the internet for people to, if you're into the chakras, you can find out about it. And if you're not, I don't want to be boring you with it. But just to bring it back into the more cosmology of what the father, the mother, and the child, as we've been talking about over the last number of episodes, in the way that I think the integration, how the mother and father come together in the human being, in you as a child, works in regard to the chakra system or whatever. Most people, or most traditions, say that, it starts from, the energy rises from the root and goes to the top, and that's the kind of journey, the spiritual journey, where, the serpent rises, the kundalini rises from your root chakra to your head chakra. Maybe so. Other people suggest that it comes from your head chakra and comes down towards the root chakra. Less people, but it still has its fans, that theory. I think it's both. I think the root chakra, the sacral chakra, and the solar plexus are the connection to the mother, to the material, and then the crown chakra, the third eye, the throat chakra, or what's coming down from spirit, and then the child is the heart. That's the integration, the connection, the love, all of these things. That's where it happens. That's, the seat of consciousness. And I think then that the chakras, the above ones and the below ones, and I don't think it means a higher order in the same way high and low magic or any of these things. It's just that's the way the energy is working. Think of it as someone lying down and energy's coming, from different sides of the body rather than an up and down thing. So the root chakra and the crown chakra would be connected or equivalent in that it's how we connect with the different things. Like the root chakra is covered, like it's grounding, it's stability, it's your basic survival, it's, the connection to the physical world. Whereas the crown chakra is, the connection to spirit, the universal connection to cosmic consciousness, all of these things. And also I think like the solar plexus and the third eye are connected in that the third eye is about insight, spiritual insight, spiritual vision, imagination, visualization, all of that thing. Whereas your solar plexus is about intuition, trusting your gut, self-worth. One is like the representation of the sun, I suppose, and one is about the inner sun, the light in the head, as it's mentioned in Theosophy. And then, of course, the throat and the sacral, or one is about communication and one is about expression. So the sacral is like your seat of creativity, of sexual energy, of outward expression, self-expression, where throat is literally your communication, your self-expression, speaking your truth. They both seem to line up. They don't follow the order that would make it perfect, where you have like the crown and the root chakra, and then you would have the ajna, and it would feel like it would be the sacral, but it seems to line up more with the solar plexus, and then the throat seems to line up more with the sacral. So it's not quite as perfect as I would like it to be, but there does seem to be some reflection between inner sight, insight and intuition, which would be, part of the solar plexus. And then, of course, like, your throat, communication, voice, singing, expression, all of that stuff. And then the sacral, which is also about expression and stuff like that. So I find that interesting that you have like the coming up from the mother, from matter, and coming down from the father and spirit joined together, with the different kind of senses of the same thing that or different expressions of the same kind of vibration, if you want, and that it all becomes a union in the heart, and that's where the seat of our soul is, or something like that. I'm sure I'm not the first person to come up with that idea or that theory of the chakras being aligned like that. I'm probably completely stealing it from some of the books I've read. But just when I put it into context of the mother and the father and whatever, so that the heart is the place where then that is the center of the universe in many ways, the child, the love, union, all of these things. So that is all I think I want to talk about the different idea of energy and how I interact with it. So to recap, I think all things are energy, but it could be just that's one way of one term or one word to use to describe that could equally be, you could use a different word. Exactly, you could say all things are spirit and make exactly the same claims as I have about everything. You're surrounded by spirit, you're imbued with spirit, spirits are spirits, gods are spirits, Reiki is channeling spirit through you into other people, whatever. I think, so by the use of energy, it's just a word that feels comfortable to me because that's how it was presented to me originally. And then all the various different experiences I've had with energy, interacting with different energies, from healing things, from transmission, from the felt presence and map. And I suppose, again, just mentioning along the way that my interaction with the various different deities, while I didn't go into any depth with them, have felt to be the same thing, in the same way that my art, my music, my creativity all feels to be the same thing. It all feels to be a different aspect of the one emanation, if you want, or the one drive, or the one thing. And all of that, I suppose I would call magic. So, yeah. Highly unlikely that there will be another episode this year, given that there's 2 weeks left in the year. It'll be certainly next year before there's any more signals. But I will be hoping in the new year to be doing more podcasts that aren't, don't have such a highfalutin arc to them, or don't make me feel like I'm under deep pressure to pass the exam. Just something a bit more probably conversational, a bit like what I'm doing on Patreon with the vlogs. Just kind of trying to find stuff that is worth talking about without just repeating myself, or without repeating what I've just said in a vlog or something like that. So if I have something interesting to say, that I feel is interesting to say or worthwhile to say, okay, I'll put it out in a podcast, that it doesn't have to be a big part of a book or part of a cosmology or any of those things. Just something to talk about the things as they come into my life. As I was saying, there is the weekly vlog that I've been doing now on Patreon for the last, whatever it is, 8 or so weeks, and they're about half an hour each, and on various different topics. If you want to join up to Patreon, support me, then that's one of the things that you will get in return. There's plenty of other things that you will get in return for your hard-earned cash too, if that's something you would like to do. Or you can just send me a donation, just send me some money to keep me going, to make sure that I can keep doing these things. You can buy me a book or an item off my Amazon wish list, or just like, share, and all those good things that really do help. Follow me on social media. I will leave all the links in the show description. And good people of the internet, may you have a wonderful end to your year. May your year have been brilliant. May you have learned a lot about yourself. May the interesting times of modern life not have been too energetically depleting on you. And may the next year bring us into a new energy that is oscillating at a much higher frequency rate or vibration, so that we all become the highest possible vibration level of who we are. Good people of the internet, may our best days be ahead, and be well.